record. All right, there you go. Let me move that
Because
out.
right now, what I'm
Yeah, go for it.
working on the integration of the wallet and some of the front end stuff. But in any event, so this account tab right here, this allows you to create your accounts, like your basically your blockchain accounts, right? So right now,
all these accounts are being created on the local instance.
correct. Yeah, this is all local testnet. So typically, it's fine that you deployed it to EOS IO, but you know, in many cases, what you'll see is that you'll create an account for the contract, and then you'll deploy the contract to that account. So in the case of this contract, for example, this testing one,
right?
Basically a contract, we could create an account called testing one, and then deploy the contract to testing one. And it probably would let us do that because it's gonna, you know, keep in mind that you could have the same contract applied to different accounts, which could get a little bit confusing. I mean, in fact, that's even on Ethereum, for example, that's how a lot of hacks in the old days were done, because what people would do is they would, you know, they copy a contract and a symbol, and they basically deploy it in a different instance, and then they'd put it on a decentralized exchange. And so people thought they were buying Ethereum when it was just some clone that someone made and deployed. It's kind of funny.
Well, you know what the good news is about this is that the laptop I'm doing this all on is like an older laptop that I bought for like $100 a few years ago used, and I did some minor upgrades to it. But it seems that the amount of resources needed to at least to get to this level of screwing around or learning the tools is available pretty much to any desktop user, I would imagine. Like anybody who has a half decent computer could be doing this.
Yeah. The other thing you'd want to do is you'd want to check your later in the projects, you may need to get your chain ID. So one way you can do that is you can interact with Cleos and you can run your get info.
Okay.
But for today,
I learned about Cleos and Kios and what was Node EOS, whatever.
Yeah, Node EOS is what you're doing. I mean, this basically started the.
Well, why is it creating so many blocks? Like, what is it? What is the thing that it's generating?
It's basically every half second. So EOS IO blockchains, every half second they produce blocks.
So even though there's no activity, it's still going to keep.
Yeah, it's still going to generate a block because it's basically, it's like a radio. So it's basically made so that, like, let's say someone's storing this information, you could basically replay this and determine where changes occur, right? It doesn't discern between like transactions versus like more than zero.
Is that because of the fact that I deployed this contract and the contract is continually running in some way, or because I don't.
No, this is Node EOS. This is not your contract.
Right. Okay. So this is just how Node EOS behaves.
This is just how your blockchain would run, how the blockchains run. We just set up the local testnet so that we're able to test our contracts.
Right. Okay.
So if we go to your contracts tab, you'll see that now you have, or you should have, at least 2 contracts. You'll have the EOS IO contract, and you should have, well,
I'd see, that's the thing is I don't know. I'm not sure what I did. And wait, let me, how did I get even to this screen?
Hold on a second. Something changed here, actually. Because now I'm not seeing. Okay, well, let's try to build it again. And then what we'll do is we'll deploy it. We'll deploy it to, I'll make an account for testing one.
Oh, got you.
And then we'll deploy it. And then we'll
when I first set it up, it came default with that ESIO contracts and account.
Yeah, that's fine. That works. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's fine.
But I did notice
even the ones I mess with, I start with the empty one and then I just build from there.
And then I did notice after I built it, it added the ABI and WASM files, obviously.
Right. and that's your compilation.
Right.
So we'll create the account. This will be your public key. And by the way, if you need your private keys, you can, there is a section up here that says manage keys, and you can show, you know,
Okay.
your private keys. Normally you wouldn't show that obviously on screen because if this was a real public network,
Right.
that would be a way for someone to hack you. But since this
Right.
is just a test net, it doesn't matter. So then what we're going to do is we're going to deploy the contract. We already built the contract. We'll deploy it to testing one.
Okay.
And
So basically, we have the same contract deployed to 2 different user accounts.
I didn't see it in your other, yeah, I didn't see it in your other contract. So you may have restarted. I'm not sure what you did, but basically this is what you would expect to see. So
Well,
you have,
when I first launched it before I got you on, it said that like, and ever since I tried deploying it, it keeps telling me it's already deployed.
yeah, and we may, I don't, that we may need a, sometimes EOS Studio is a little buggy in a sense that I haven't seen that myself, but I know if you do run into that, you can just exit out of EOS Studio and then try to exit back in and see if it seems to see
Have
your,
you used EOS Studio before?
a little bit. I mean, the past 2 or 3 weeks I've been using it more so than before.
Okay.
Um,
So this
but
doesn't look unfamiliar to you because it's pretty much the same thing, but just like the Linux version of it, I guess.
yeah, it looks the same. So basically here, it looks like what they have here is so here's how you interpret this. This body right here, this section here is your tables. So any tables you have, any records are going to be in this tab. So you could see here, if I hover over this, it says tables. You have
Right.
a table called messages. And, as we develop these contracts or apps, you could have, in theory, many different tables for a single smart contract. But in this case, they just have, messages as the single table. And I'm guessing what it does is it stores anything you put into your hello world. So if you
Right.
take a look at the code, I mean, before we run it, let's just understand what's going on.
Right.
So the way this works is they defined an action called testing one,
Right.
and the action name is actually, I'm sorry, the action is actually high. This testing one actually tells the compiler the scope. So in this case, you're just saying action testing one, double colon high. So action high, it takes 2 parameters, a name and a string. And we call the name from, and we call the string message. So this next line says, okay, make sure that the person running this code is actually authorized to do that. So the person whose name we invoke in this high action, they have to be the user that is logged in. If they're not, don't run the code. That's what this says.
Right. Okay.
Do you get that? Or
Yeah.
okay. And then it says it's going to create a basically an
Hold
instance.
on, back up. That name actually refers to like an EOS account name.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
The
we'll
string
text.
is just an arbitrary text string.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter. And we can play with this to prove out our interpretation is right, because we can play with the code. Like when we go back to the contracts tab, you can play with this to prove that this logic works. There's a way to, we can easily do that. Line 7 is just initializing the table, and looks like the payer is going to be the contract, and the scope is the contract. So it just tells you who it is and where it's stored. And then find the record from the messages table. So it creates a message generator, and it's going to find, and it's going to use from.value. So what it's doing here is it's taking the name and it's translating that to an actual value. And then it's going to use this method to find that within the messages table. So it's basically saying, find this in the stack. I have all these records in my table. Find this record and store it in message generator. And
Okay.
if the message generator reaches the end of the table, what does that tell you, you think? If you search for something and you reach the end of it and if you don't find anything, what do you think that means?
If you don't find anything, well, go on to the next step, I guess, or
Yeah, it doesn't exist is what it
doesn't
means,
exist.
right?
Yeah, right.
If
So
this
you
message
return a
generator,
message saying it doesn't exist. I don't know.
yeah, but what this line is telling you is it's a test case that says if the message generator is equal to this end, like meaning it hasn't found anything. Because if it's found something, it wouldn't be dot end. It would be like an actual value.
Right. Because
If
the end is blank.
yeah, correct. Yeah, you can think of it like that. So if it reaches this, if it equals this method, now it knows that it needs to create a new record. So what it does is line 13 is a in place method. It's a function. It's a built-in function, and what it
So
allows us
is this in place? Is this like C++ or
correct. Yeah. It's not even like EOSIO, which is great. I mean, and that's the beauty of I think EOSIO is that in some cases it's applicable for other skill sets. Like it's not like Ethereum where
well, the one of
um,
the big beauties of what I realized, and since I talked to you last of the EOSI framework, is they've made it to where you can actually develop like a regular developer, and build on the framework and think in the same way that you would normally develop and not go into some weird spaces. I guess that's what's one of the things I was in that I came across in the training, in that certification.
yeah. So we use this in place method, which, as you're saying, is just a C++ method. It allows us to add a record to our messages table. So this first portion tells you the table, right? And we
Mm.
got this from this instance. So line 7 is where you created this.
So do tables always have underscores? Is that the convention?
No, that's just what they did here. And you can understand, you can check. How do you know what this table name is? Well, the way you would know that is you go to the include, you go to your testing dot HPP, testing one,
Mm.
and it has a struct. So this struct defines your table structure. So you can see here it has two pieces of information that it stores. It has a username and it has a string. And then this third line is just a primary key. Are you familiar with primary keys?
No.
Primary keys are just a simple way that databases keep track of records. So primary keys are basically unique in nature. And what they allow databases to do, because that's what this is they allow us to search within a record set for a unique ID, right? It allows us to basically find shit that we were interested in.
Hmm.
So in this case, what you're going to use here, what they're using is the username. They're using that as the primary key because it says here auto primary key, which is just a method, constant, return the user dot value. So it's going to convert this name into I think it's like a uint. It's like an integer equivalent of this username, and then it's going to store that in the database. And so then when you go to find, see here, you're trying to find this. That's how it links together. So this find method basically is looking for the primary key where this,
Oh, it's looking for the integer, not the name, actually.
yeah, that's why you say from dot value.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I guess, yeah. Right.
And then if it finds it, it's not going to do this. But if it doesn't find it, right? If it equals the end, if what this returns on line 10 is the end, it knows it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, it's going to use the in place method to insert a new record within the table. So it's going to take a couple different parameters. The first one is from, which is the name. And then it's going to take it's actually going to use what's called a lambda function. And so what a lambda function is, it's basically just a function that it's like almost self-enclosing. Like if you study this syntax, look here. There's a parentheses here. There's the first parameter. And this entire thing, believe it or not, is your second parameter. This entire thing is your second parameter. So it's actually a function within this parameter. And what it does is it passes that as a reference. So this second argument is this variable MSG. It's passed as reference to this in place method. And what's MSG made of? It's made of these types of subcomponents, message.user, message.text. And what are you doing here? You're assigning the value from, which you're going to pass in, right? When we call the action, you're going to pass this in. I'll show you that in a moment. And you're also going to pass in a message, which I'll show you. It takes those two pieces of information and it assigns it to this message type or message object. Okay. And then it takes that and it uses this in place to insert it in the record table.
Okay, so that message object is the MSG underscore ITR and the MSG dot user. That MSG is the same MSG essentially. Like
this MSG here. Sorry, this MSG is this MSG. This is just this is like a child element where it's basically a property of the MSG, and that is defined, by the way, in your struct table. So keep that in mind. It's defined in your struct table.
So is that MSG above it? Is it essential that it's named the MSG underscore ITR? What is that? Auto this thing right here.
These aren't the same, no.
Yeah, okay,
this is not the same as this.
Right. Okay, but it just happened to be spelled the same because they're using it.
Yeah, but it's not. They're not related in any way.
Gotcha. That's what I just want to clarify.
And then this structure, you're like, well, where are you getting this from, JP? Like, where does this MSG dot user and MSG dot text come from? Like, where is that coming from? Well, all you need to do is look at your struct. So let's go to the struct. Look here. See how this struct is user and text? That's where we're getting it from. So we have to match, we have to follow the struct, like basically these names in the struct. We're accessing those and we're assigning it through this assignment. So we're taking the argument you're going to provide, you're going to pass in, and we're going to assign it to this, basically this object or this type. And then what we're going to say is otherwise, so if you have a record, so only do this if it does not exist. If it exists, you're going to modify. So instead of using the in place method, notice it says underscore messages dot modify. So it's just a different function. Here we used in place, here we use modify. It's pretty much the same type of format if you notice these. The difference here is you're passing the MSTR, the message underscore ITR. And what that does is it tells I guess, your code where to modify the record, right? If you're going to modify something, how do you do that? What's the first thing you need to know? You need to know what record you're modifying, right? Would you agree with that?
Right.
Okay, so it takes this line here, line 10. Okay, line 10 can do one of two things. What's one permutation, you think?
Well, it's looking through the messages in the table to find the
record.
Anything present in that
matches, right? Yeah, that matches your primary key. So there's only one of two things that are going to happen. One is you find it,
or you don't.
It returns that record, that row, or you don't. If it doesn't find it, it's going to do what we just reviewed, which is all this stuff here.
Right.
If it finds it, it's going to assign it into this this type, this MSG iterator, and then you can use that. So what we're going to do is we're going to this modify method. You can pass into it that record, that exact record. So this is tells it where, and then from there you say, you know, who pays for this, and then you pass the actual thing that you're going to change. So in this case, you're going to pass in by reference this MSG, and you're going to modify the text to equal the new message. So in this case, what we'd expect to occur is the message is updated. That's all this is doing. It's going to take whatever you put in the string, and it's going to update it to whatever you had there. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'm just not familiar with C. I'm not familiar with most coding languages at all. So it's sort of like um, I do understand it pretty much as I could based on your explanation, because I'm sort of intuiting what a lot of this is meaning. But I probably benefit from just understanding C++ a little more.
Yeah, I mean, and some of that you're going to do, I'm sure, and but some of it's just, I think,
This is so straightforward. It doesn't really look like it's not like mad science here. You know what I'm
yeah, I
saying?
was going to say, yeah. Yeah, so if we go back to your code, let's try it out. So the first thing you're going to do is say hi, and let me show you that what I was telling you about before. So keep in mind that well, this is going to be interesting, Doug, because I think you said you deployed it to, let me show you something. Let me put a dummy account here,
Cool. Yeah.
and then you're going to see something. So remember that require auth code you put in.
Right.
So if I put dummy in this account
Right.
tab, but let's say I try to put in testing one, and I say this is a test. Do you think this is going to work?
It'll fill the auth requirements from the from field, is what I'm assuming.
Right, correct. Because you're logged in right now as a dummy.
Right.
So there you go.
Okay. Missing auth exception, missing required first.
So if you change this now to match these, you fulfill that require auth. So is it going to run?
Should.
Right. Yeah. So there you go.
Okay, so what it did is it just added a record because prior there was none, I'm assuming.
Correct. And you can go and look at the raw, data for the transaction if you want. And by the way, I like to use this, JavaScript. I'm sure you're learning, but this.
No, I don't know any JavaScript. I mean, I've used JavaScript code in web, but I don't really always know what to do. I'm just copying and pasting someone else's stuff.
This console area is pretty helpful for troubleshooting. I mean, that's what I'm using right now because I'm running into different issues with my the wallet integration, just because it's not.
So you're saying looking at these transaction details is helpful?
I look at them. I look at my errors. I'm able to kind of figure things out that way because.
So even though you have a successful transaction, maybe what you were trying to do wasn't successful, and you can only know that from looking at the transaction details.
It really depends on what you're doing, but I mean, I find the console, sometimes I spit out different data there just to figure things out. Like for my, when I did the CRUD exercise for block 1 certification, that's what I was using because you're going to have to build a lot more like searches and inserts, and it's a lot more involved.
So the last time we did this and we did recording, or the first time, and the stuff you were showing me, that was part of the training certification, I'm assuming.
No, but the last one I did, I think it was last week, I don't think you were with me. I did like half an hour, and that covered.
Was that the one you were streaming on YouTube?
Yeah, that one covers the exercise.
Okay, because I caught a piece of that just because I liked and commented enough to have you start appearing in my YouTube news in my algorithm suggestions. So I saw that live when you were doing it, and I clicked on it and watched it for a little bit.
Yeah, that one definitely I was running into all kinds of stuff before I did that video, like, and I used this console to help me just figure out where I was going south on certain things. And I was able to work through it all. So I at the end I was able to create, read, update, and delete records for tic-tac-toe and kind of keep track of positions. So right now what I'm trying to work on is more of a integrating the wallet, and then probably a very, very simple GUI like that just shows basically a game, a silly game.
Okay.
But in any event, so now that we've done that, if you
Oh, hold on. Let me get this out of here. There you
if you refresh this, you'll see this.
go. Interesting.
Yeah, and then you can clear. So if you run clear, it should clear this table, anything in the table. Because if you look at your code, we can go study the clear action, right? So here's your clear action. What it does is it says, first it checks for your auth. In this case, notice what is it checking, you think, on line 26?
Well, it's saying, are you the are you the same person that submitted the? Hold on, because I guess what it is that when we're using this uh, local testnet, we have up here like some sort of level of authentication.
Correct. But what is the get self, you think? What do you think that refers to?
Get self refers to the contract.
Correct. The contract, the account associated with where the contract's deployed. So
Account
it's basically saying,
the contract. Okay.
yeah, it's basically saying if you are the account that deployed this contract, then you're allowed, you're authorized. But if you're not, I'm not going to clear the records, right? It makes sense if you think
Right.
about it, because you're basically doing the whole clear of everything. So after line 26, line 28 is what? It's initializing messages table. We're going to call that underscore messages. Same thing that you did in the previous example. And then it's going to create this message iterator. It's gonna assign that to the beginning. So this dot begin is just a method you have in like C++. It just says start at the beginning of my records. That's all it's saying.
Okay.
And then you're running a while loop, which is this while loop is pretty much identical whether you're doing JavaScript or whatever. It's pretty much the same, but it's saying while this variable message generator does not equal the end, do this code inside.
Hey, did you did you do that Java boot camp or get accepted or whatever?
I did. You know what? They're gonna postpone me till July.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So or June or something. So it's disappointing because well, the one I want to do is part time, but if I'm gonna do it in June, I'm gonna have to be full time. So I'm gonna be working like 12-hour days because I don't want to finish. I don't want to wait till the end of next year to finish my program.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it'll be a more condensed program for me, unfortunately, because they only offer you like I think it's like a 3 or 4 month program, or you can do like a 9 month program. So by basically not basically they ran out of room. Um, yeah, if I did the same program I wanted to do, I wouldn't finish till like next March, and that to me is not.
Right. Oh
Uh,
man, and the thing is that this industry is changing so quickly. Timing is really like,
yeah,
makes a difference.
yeah. So I think I'm gonna do I'll do the more condensed, full time version. But in any event, that's how this works. It's gonna run this message.erase. It's gonna take that record, and then it's going to flip back up to the while loop again. So it's just going to continue to erase all the records. That's how this works.
So now this new project that I made that came with these default HPP and CPP and README file. Now that's native to this EOS Studio, but what if I wanted to pull in some other existing project? Like, what's the way? How do you go about doing that?
Like, what would you want to pull in
Well,
now?
just like you're like, for example, you're working on more advanced stuff like the tic-tac-toe or the Alice contract, or just any like something beyond the hello world thing. Like, is that something that happens through Docker or GitHub or
I mean, you could basically you could do a pull request on GitHub, or you can just download it. You could
right,
literally
right,
download them as zips
right?
and extract it, and then load it in here as a new project, and you
Okay.
should be good. I mean,
Yeah,
the
that's what I
issue
was thinking.
I'm more running into is like EOSIO has a lot of like even the certification program. You know, they have a lot of these exercises, but what I'm finding is that some of the information that's shown, it's either out of date or it may even have bugs. Like there's bugs like I'm documenting as I go along, like the wallet code I'm doing
Right.
that just had like bugs in it, and I don't think they were intentional, but it's just like someone who's new. I mean, I'm pretty new. I mean, in the past, not having any JavaScript experience, I would have just kind of maybe thrown my hands up. But I've been able to kind of work through those issues and kind of, just play around with it. And I am kind of making progress. So,
So one of the things I did notice is that in the just the video trainings, I was pausing a lot and doing a lot of Google searches because I was getting introduced to a lot of new things and concepts and networks that I hadn't heard of. And one of the things I noticed is that it seems as though, you know how Block One initially had all this fury of development? I'm noticing a lot of stuff sort of like around 2 or 3 years ago, around 3 years ago, sort of just trailing off and like what's going on with the EOS factory. Because EOS factory was working in hand with EOS IDE and not so much EOS Studio, but it just seemed like there was a lot of development going in all these different directions that just sort of petered out. And I'm like not sure exactly what that's supposed to mean, but I don't know. Like just even like the Python stuff, because I'm real interested. I'm real interested in like methodologies that take advantage of using more sophistication in handling these smart contracts. And so it seems as though that it's hard to find current up-to-date information on EOS. It's all scattered and like you have to really dig. It's like there's no one place I can go to where someone will tell me if what the authoritative information is. And a lot of times I find this old information on Google that if I actually like get into Telegram or start asking around and they start pointing me to other things. So I think there is a lot of that. Like even just setting up the development environment between Windows and Linux, I realized I couldn't make them exactly the same. That the Visual Studio Code they offer for Linux is different than what they offer for Windows. And I was even reading about that in some of the technical documents. And so there might be like even when I set up this EOS instance, I had choices along the way to fulfill the prerequisites, and I always chose I chose the latest version,
yeah,
and I don't even know does like what does that get me into? Is that what's really being used? I have no idea. Like right now, it says EOS CDT v1.8.1. So I don't know if you know about the CDT thing, but that's like the community development tools for EOS.
it's the contract development
Yeah,
toolkit.
contract development tool. Thank you. And so like I don't know if it makes a difference if I use 1.8.1 versus 1.8.0, but I'm using everything I picked was the latest.
Right.
And so I'm assuming that's where I want to be.
I think for what you're doing right now,
I don't think it's gonna hurt. Yeah,
I
for
was
what
going
I'm
to
doing
tell
right
you.
now.
Yeah, I would not get into the nuances of that, but
Because quite honestly, it's like I'm with you. I'm like leapfrogging. Like if I was trying to do this sequentially, I should not even be talking to you. But if I was going to try to do this really sequentially, I should never even got involved with EOS. That's not my way. Like I want to jump ahead, you know.
yeah. Yeah, but no, that's a good start. I mean, it sounds like you understand at least the basics. You
Well,
know,
dude, I mean, if you think about it, I didn't even know anything about EOS since until the beginning of this year. So I feel pretty proud of myself to get as far as I've gotten. Like freaking Dario is offering me tokens to give away to, do with this thing. And you know what? I'm not fully convinced. I'm sort of like, I really appreciate you because I'm not really convinced in just having to agree with everybody, to sort of like, can I still participate in a decentralized, autonomous community, and not agree with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, and I seem to there is a minority, I guess, of folks in EOS that are probably more sticklers, even for our own things that we do. So I'm very critical on even initiatives I'm trying to do, for the community, and like, is this actually worth proposing, or is it just a waste of time? Because I
Right.
don't.
And you know what? And that goes actually, I wanted to talk to you real briefly since I got you, hackathon. Because, I fell out from even focusing on trying to keep up with stuff with EOS and what was going on in my life. But I caught back up with the hackathon planning in Discord, and I saw all the stuff you had posted there. Um, what I realized is I actually got into the London hackathon, and I forget the guy who won it, but I was looking at James Purvey or something like that. But I was just trying to understand more how these hackathons work, and I really think that there's something there, like the lack of having a hackathon and just sort of like, like even that the notion of doing bounties within it and just like attracting greater levels of intelligence than just you know what you're going to get in a Discord type or Telegram type of environment,
Yeah,
um, and so the whole thing between virtual and real, it was sort of like, I was just trying to wrap my head around there's the whole concept of it. And then after looking at, man, there's all these different ways and established formats, it was just sort of like, it was a lot for me to wrap my head around, but I just see the value in it.
yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to put together. But it's just being consistent. So we're just going through the steps and evaluating the
But see,
different offerings.
there's no real official position on that from the ENF, I assume. Like they're relying on you to organize it. You know what I'm saying? Is it? I mean, you seem to you're
No,
like,
it's gonna be something that you know EOS has stakeholders, right? So ultimately, it requires stakeholder interest and acceptance, right? So part of our job is to make the business case for actually providing that service or that event to the community. If we can't make a business case for it, it doesn't make sense to bring to the community, right?
right, but
But in order for us to do that, we have to actually do the research and figure out, okay, what are the how can we design this? What are the incentives? What are the costs? What are the components? What are the options? What is our low end option, or medium end option, higher end option? Those kind of things.
well, it just seems to me that something like that shouldn't have to be generated from an individual community member. It would want to be sort of like looked into at a more official level. It doesn't. I don't know. I'm not complaining or anything. It's just I don't know. It just seems like it's a worthwhile effort that I don't understand how budgets are allocated in this EOS world. With delegates and whatnot. But anyways, I really applaud your efforts with that, and don't know where it's going to go. But I'm still confused over whether a virtual versus a real event, like which would be more beneficial, or you know,
Well, I
uh,
don't think I don't think it's binary though, right? I
right?
mean,
No, it doesn't have to be exactly.
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, that's like life, right? Even now, right? There's nuances to um there's nuances to everything. I mean, even these good, bad. I mean, it's not not even people are like that, right? It's a binary. It's a nuance thing where it's like, well, the in-person event has these advantages, and the virtual event has these other advantages. I mean, one of the things, for example, with the virtual event that really comes to in my mind anyway, is just having the ability to actually tap into talent all over the world that may not even have a way to physically get to a physical event, right? So like I participated in the San Francisco hackathon. I actually went there and got a chance to pitch to Mike Novogratz, and I brought a team with me, a team of 4 from Arizona. So we were one of like a couple hundred teams there, I think, and it was an amazing event. But how many people do you think have the opportunity to travel to San Francisco? Now, San Francisco is an international, it is more of an international, I would say, destination, but how many people can just take a weekend out of their life and fly to San Francisco for an event,
And
you
now
know?
when they did that hackathon, did it follow any kind of like, did they use like an agile framework of scrums, or did
No.
it was
So it was fairly
free
open
form?
to your implementation as a team. And at that time, I had no experience with developing, or it was just it was very eye opening for me. It was like my first hackathon. So that was one of my goals in doing these exercises with folks and talking about the code, is just making sure that I understand what the heck's going on with my smart contracts. Like, I should be able to talk through and understand a contract and troubleshoot stuff, and so but the only way to do that is to put the time in. So, but at that time I didn't do that. I had no idea how to connect or do troubleshooting or any of that stuff, man. So but it was an amazing event, and we came out with an idea. Anyway, I came out with an idea. I got some feedback from Mike Novogratz, which was nice. um but what I learned from it is, at least myself, and this is going to be controversial, is that I'm not certain that projects that reinvent existing business models have to be totally decentralized. And for some people, that they don't like that. Uh, they have a different ethos, but I think I'm going to tend to focus my energy on hybridized models where I use, say, a blockchain for hashing, for proving my integrity,
Mhm.
but I'm also, looking at how to use the private chains as well, right? Because I
Mhm.
want to actually create businesses. I want to build businesses. I don't want to just create some token that you speculate on
Right.
to
And
make money. I want to make a business that my mom or my sister can go to and use as a
right.
service,
And
because it's
and
better than what we have today.
watching all those videos like I was earlier today on just blockchain basics and understanding the different advantages and disadvantages between public and private and hybrid. It's so much like I can't even believe I got involved with EOS without having all that background, because there's a lot of just sort of like foundational knowledge that if you don't have it, it's like you can't really have a educated or informed discussion over what's going on.
Yeah.
And so like that's why I'm all like, I want to finish all this foundational stuff, but at the same time, I don't really need to do that to jump into dealing with the stuff that we're screwing around with today. But I
Yeah.
sort of feel like I just want to build an order. Um, the other thing I was wanting to know from you is how much have you come across study of the different types of ERC standards in relation to your screwing around with the code in the smart contracts? Has that even come across your radar, or have you looked at like ERC? What is it, 721 versus like I was sort of curious about the NFT standards because so many people have interest in NFTs now, and I think a lot of it is fluff. And I know that like a lot of the NFT market's built on Ethereum and OpenSea, and is just like all this whole crazy cost per transaction deal going on. And so I didn't know if that the different standards actually have any relevance to the level of uh, playing around with the code that you're at right now, or if that's something that you've come across. Because like for example, the ERC are all really Ethereum standards. I guess that there's some level of interoperability that is see, that's the thing I'm trying to understand. It's like all these protocols and these different token standards, I guess, are all open standards, but no one's really agreeing on which open standard to use.
Well, I mean, Ethereum is its own network, but
Right.
um, I think the biggest piece would be EVM capability and maybe some integration with those token standards that I know separately Dan and maybe others in the EOS spectrum have proposed a more robust token standard for EOS. So that's what's coming. That's what's being, that is in the pipeline to be developed.
Have you followed Wax at all, or that
No,
really?
I don't follow that.
Okay, I was just
No.
curious.
Yeah,
So
I'm not really big on NFTs or that sort of model. I'm more interested in, like I said, like an Uber or an Airbnb that I build on.
Yeah,
I
actually,
build with EOS
no,
and
let's talk
I
about that because I actually am curious about that too. The Uber, Airbnb, to both of those models specifically, because I want to do vacation rentals myself here in the near future. And I was actually looking about buying out a local taxi business, and I looked into the Lieber taxi thing, which is really a proof of concept based on Telegram.
well, you don't really need a the whole point of this is not having to buy anybody out. It's just
Oh
you
yeah,
having to build offering them a network model that allows anybody to leverage their assets, right? So it doesn't
right.
necessarily require you to
Well, no, 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 but
own.
this buying a business out would just happen because I needed a ride somewhere and I had to pay $70 for a cab. And the guy was offering me the business. And so I got into the nitty-gritty of what that actually meant and what their cash flow was like. And I realized, man, this is a good industry that I guess the thing is that when I got into it, I figured out the simplest off-the-shelf solution right now, if you don't build something yourself, is probably going to be a WordPress plugin that's like I mean it wouldn't be what we're talking about, but it would be just a way to monetize it in a local arena. But I did have interest in that, and like I said, there's this thing that I found that was just basically it was based on Telegram, strangely enough, but it was like a proof of concept for a open source type of Uber.
Right. Well, I mean, it's all possible, like I said, but the main thing is in my opinion, anyway, it's the platform and giving that ability or the technology open to others that is what's attractive to me. And then the other challenge is how you how you make offerings for that based on regulatory laws, right? So I spend a
Right,
lot of time thinking about how to do that and do it in a compliant way.
right.
uh so that's another reason.
Well, because the thing that gets me with Uber, or I'm sort of a little confused by, is when you have a driver, do they have their own vehicle and have their own insurance? And actually, I just talked to my insurance agent today, and what he told me is if you have a standard policy and you do not derive the majority of your income from it, and it cannot be greater than 3 days per week, then your standard auto insurance policy will cover you in the case of Uber driving. And so for me, it's like that's a big deal or difference if if I have independent contractors on the system or you have employees, and how that plays out state by state and liability and all that. See that to me seems more complicated. The risk liability part seems more complicated than the actual design of that program.
You're saying for developing one of those, or
Yeah, for developing an Uber, I'm not clear on a lot of answers to just things on the business side of what's legal and what do you need to protect yourself. And because even like I guess the idea is that as an Uber driver they have some sort of insurance that covers their drivers irrespective of what your policy is. And see, I don't know if that's true or not, but
yeah, I don't know, but I do know that there is a community on EOS.io. It's not on EOS, but it's on EOS.io. It's they basically developed it's Ava. Ava has a project, and with Ava, the project they basically have developed that technology, but it's in Canada only. So
what's it called? Ava?
Ava, like EVA.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you walking me through that. You actually got me a lot farther along and more explanation than I would have just screwing around on my own, obviously.
Yeah, no problem. And hopefully you keep it up. What the next steps for you are. Kind of curious to know. Are you going to continue to your next step?
Well, I don't even, oh, yeah, I would like to, but see, I'm not even sure exactly what my next step is because uh well, I want to just finish the training certifications, like um, whatever, because right now I'm still just in the blockchain basics. It's not even like I'm sort of just getting the like the non-technical background stuff. And so when it comes to actually screwing around with the code, it's sort of like me just jumping ahead, doing whatever you suggest, or just finding stuff on the internet just to play with, which I don't mind doing. I sort of like doing that. Um, but I have to fly out to California here in about a week, and I got another funeral to participate in and plan, and just like property issues and cash flow issues, family issues, and all this stuff, to where like I won't even really honestly be free to have like focus time to just focus on work alone, probably for like at least another month or two. And so
Yeah.
anything I do is just like haphazard here or there.
Okay.
So and I honestly, I just feel like I don't want to stop, because right now my mind has absorbed so much in such a short period of time. If I don't keep at it, like I'm going to lose what little I've already gained. And I want to keep immersing myself to whatever degree I have time for, and so often the way that comes out is, just trying to weed through the minefield of notifications I get in Discord and Telegram when like, and I'm at the point now where I just stop reading stuff. Like I'm tired about hearing any news. I'm just like, I want to get back to just understanding the fundamentals and learning how to manipulate the technology to a certain degree. I want to keep up with this EOS open stage concept too, because sort of what I see developing is like, I know you're very specific and focused on what information you'd like to learn and share, and I want to be able to like focus on that in a limited way where I don't have to like have other people trying to join us in what we're doing and take it off course. But at the same time, I sort of want to create like a this this sort of kind of place where people can ask questions or bring up thoughts or talk about whatever level they're ready or able, that where their learning level is at, like to have just kind of discussions and whatnot. And so I'm trying to figure out how to like package that all into actually something that makes sense in terms of the time it takes me to do and the reward I get out of it. And if it can be something, because it's sort of like what Dario started talking to me about. He's all like, man, he's like, what you're doing, the EOSBs should be doing. And I'm like, well, that's funny you say that, Dario, because yeah, and why aren't they doing it? Like, and so it's sort of like, do I just have to do something like this so someone else does it? Because, quite honestly, I got about a million other things that I could be doing that are just as or greater level of value. The only reason I'm doing this now is because I'm learning a tremendous amount. People are supporting me and just shooting from the hip and getting other people to join in. And I actually have like a handful of people that they want their hands held and and to share the learning experience. And I haven't even really figured out where they're at. It might be that everyone's already ahead of me, but it's quite interesting because I have been able to sort of provide some value and feedback to people in the community that are approaching me, asking me questions, even though I'm just sort of really new to it. So I find that all very entertaining. I feel like there's a promise and a future for me if I can sort of just keep up with it and figure out what niche, makes sense for me.
Yeah. Well, cool.
So as far as I'm concerned with you, I haven't got to that point where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. I don't want to be a programmer. I never wanted to be, like, please stop. It's just sort of like, okay, like I could do more of this. Like, I'm open-minded. Maybe I will get into, maybe I'll have enough knowledge of it to be a beneficial and from a consulting standpoint, or maybe I'll start, trying to work on a project where this foundational knowledge is essential. I have no idea, but I'm
Yeah.
open-minded and I'm just going with it. And, I'm happy to, the long story short is all the time I put into it, I feel as though I've gained a tremendous amount back in terms of a learning experience and some level of, rapport within the community. So I don't want to lose that. I just want to build on
Cool, man. All right, my friend. Well,
it.
have yourself a good day, and I guess I will talk to you later.
Yeah, and do you mind if I just, Rob, publish this just so we have it to review or whatever?
That's fine. I don't care. It's fine.
Okay, I'll probably end up just uploading that as is, because if I don't do something with it soon, I'll probably forget about it.
All right.
Awesome,
Talk to you
thank
later.
you.
Ciao.
Goodbye.